Hi, everyone. I'm Linda Sheldon-Feld with the International Grief Institute and creator of Grief Diaries. And this is Moments of Hope, a show featuring people who've turned pain into purpose to do good things in the world and are willing to have a conversation about things that America doesn't talk about. And that is death, grief, heartbreak, healing, and hope. And tonight's guest is the very lovely Becky Austill Clausen. Welcome to the show, Becky.
Oh, Linda, thanks so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have you here. You have such a cool story, and I can't wait for viewers to hear it. But first, I have to say your pedigree. Okay, so Becky, you graduated summa cum laude with a master's in occupational therapy from Boston University. You own your own thriving therapy business. You're a hospice volunteer, and you are a Reiki master. Super cool. You are known as a science-based expert in the field of occupational therapy, which is what makes this show tonight so interesting. The first occupational therapist to teach Reiki certificate courses at the American Occupational Therapy Association annual conference. How cool is that? You are a fellow of the American Occupational Therapy Association, president of the Delaware Occupational Therapy Association, vice president of all the OT state associations, and Joint Commission home health representative, and you have provided rehabilitation services to over 100,000 clients. How cool is that? Congratulations, and thank you for all that you do.
Thanks. I have to make one correction in that I'm not currently president or vice president or Joint Commission Home Health. That was in the past, but I did do that.
But it's still part of your pedigree.
It
is. So for viewers who don't know what occupational therapists do, when my husband had a stroke nearly 7 years ago, he was rendered paralyzed right down the midline. So his entire right side was paralyzed. And this came on the heels of losing our teenage daughter. And he was only 46 years old. And most people say, well, how did he have a stroke like that at 46? And in my heart and in my head, it was because the grief was killing him. Sure. And men are wired differently than women. And he didn't talk a lot about the grief of losing our daughter. And it proved the perfect storm. His blood pressure went up, his cholesterol went through the roof, stress, it just all came down to the perfect storm, and he suffered a massive stroke. And so he spent 17 days in the hospital and then came home under my care, and I was terrified. And we continued outpatient occupational therapy, speech therapy, and physical therapy. And the occupational therapists are the ones that help him regain how to function in life, such as how to pick up a pencil. And when you're paralyzed, something so simple as picking up a pencil takes a lot of hard work. And it's things like that, activities of daily living that the occupational therapist helped him to recover. And thanks to their dedication and their hard work, people like Becky, my husband is doing great. And so that gives you a snippet into the life of what Becky does day in and day out. So thank you for all that you do. That's amazing. I'm so grateful, eternally grateful. And the thing is, if you haven't needed an occupational therapist, a lot of people don't even know what that is. But I do, and I'm grateful for all that you do.
Gosh,
so bless you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. That was excellent. Way to go.
A real life experience is often the best way to educate someone. So I read your pedigree, and that's impressive. But a lot of people, don't understand how important that is. And more importantly, what do you do with it? Well, that's what you do with it. You help people regain function so that they can have a quality of life. And that's a very important career to have. So thank you and bless your heart. So you, being the science-based expert that you are, you had a pivotal moment in your own life that had to do with your brother's death. But before you share that with us, tell us about your brother.
Sure. Well, first of all, again, thank you so much for having me be here.
It's my delight.
Thanks. My brother is 4 years younger than I am, and he's gay. And he came out when he was in his early 20s, and it was just part of who he is and who he was. And it was just, everybody accepted it. And a couple of years before he passed, I was walking on Coast Guard National Seashore. We always go to the Cape to go camping. And I just casually said to David, because this was in the 1990s when thousands of people were dying of AIDS, thousands and thousands of people.
They sure were.
I just said, hey, David, you've been tested for AIDS. And he turned away. And that was not what I expected at all. And it was the longest 10 seconds of my life. And he turned back and he said, I'm HIV positive. And I didn't know what that was. And I said, well, what's that? And he said, well, it goes into AIDS. And at that time it did. And AIDS was a killer. There was no chance of survival. And so what happened was David, I asked him about his medical care. He was getting great medical care. You'll hear a Boston accent from me. I grew up in Boston. He was living around Boston. And he said, Becky, please don't tell anybody, because there was really quite a concern that you could get AIDS just by being with people that had AIDS.
Oh, yeah. Back then, people were afraid that they would get AIDS from touching someone who had AIDS, from drinking out of the same glass as someone. It was a huge movement of fear and unknown. And I have a friend, Benjamin Allen, that he lost his wife and his 2 children. His wife was pregnant, needed a blood transfusion. They didn't know it at the time, but the blood was tainted. And first, the baby died, and then she died, and then their firstborn son, the older of the 2 kids, died. They all 3 died, and he's the only survivor. But they were kicked out of their church. The boys were kicked out of their school. I mean, all because of fear. So a terrible time in our society.
It was very hard. David asked me not to tell anyone. He said, please don't tell anyone. I'm well aware of the precautions, and don't even tell your husband, Jeff. And so I found myself in bookstores, and I had no idea about a section called New Age or holistic or metaphysical. I didn't even know what those words were, but I found myself attracted to books about the afterlife, which I didn't even know anything about. And so I started to read, and I would send David some of these books so that when he passed, he was aware that there was a possibility that we could communicate, but we had never really talked very much about it. He just went on with his life. And of course, I was trying to do my best to go on with mine. And
so he knew he was likely terminal then at that point?
When I talked
did he have any idea how long he was going to live?
No, he didn't. When I talked to him, he had AIDS, or he was HIV positive for 3 years. And so he lived for an additional 4 more years. And so he was considered at that point a long-term survivor. So for
Is that right?
Yeah, it was tough. Oh, it was awful.
So at what point did you tell your parents?
I didn't say anything. David came out to tell them that he had AIDS 6 months before he passed. And so the whole family knew 6 months before he passed, and we were all filled with grief and giving him as much support as we possibly could. And David always said if he ever went to the total in an ambulance, he wasn't coming home. And that's exactly what happened. And my parents, they said, Becky, David just went to the hospital in the ambulance. And I was in Pennsylvania, and he's right outside of Boston. And it was terrible. And so I immediately stopped work for the day and flew up to Boston, and it was terminal. It was tough.
So sorry to watch them wither away like that.
It was tough. It made me think, because I work all the time. I am a workaholic. I was much more of a workaholic then. And I went to see David. I knew he was terminal. And the first thing he said was, Becky, I'm so sorry to get you away from work. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is a terrible thing to say. I thought to myself, that is not good. It is not good for my brother who's dying to say, I'm sorry to take you from work. But it was really like an aha moment.
Oh, bless his heart. Bless his heart. And so how did your parents deal with the death? I mean, you're siblings, so your dynamics of grief are very different. And often people will say to the sibling, you've got to be strong for your parents, take care of your parents. And yet you are faced with your own grief. But before we explore that, how was your parents? How are they now?
My parents handled it very well. They were very sad. They couldn't believe their only son was dying. my dad's a minister, and he is an Episcopalian minister. And I had some experiences in the hospital that were otherworldly. And I shared them with Mom and Dad when they happened. And Dad's comment was, well, Becky, people deal with death all sorts of different ways. And I was really proud of them, because when David passed and we had the funeral, Mom and Dad did not hide the reason he passed. And I was really proud of him for that, because that was part of David. You know, it was just very nice. Dad and Mom were both very respected in the community, and they were quite upfront about the fact that David had AIDS, and we loved David, and it was a beautiful service, and hundreds of people were there, and it was really very, very lovely.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. Beautiful. You know, the parents kind of set the tone for that kind of, how that son is going to die. Are they going to die with dignity, or are they going to die with shame?
Yes.
And your parents, kudos to them, bless them. Agreed. I mean, that's the best gift they could have given themselves, their son, you. That's amazing. That's Agreed. Amazing. So how about you? How did you deal with all of that?
I think everything in life is positive, and I could find nothing positive about the experience. And what happened was my heart was closed, and it was closed and just filled with grief. I couldn't feel anything except for the grief until 6 weeks past David's passage. I was riding my horse through a Christmas tree farm, and I received the best present of my entire life. And it was the first day that I was able to open my heart. It was in November, and the sun was shining. We had our first frost. Icicles were coming from the trees. Rainbows were sparkling all around. And I opened my heart just a little and said, "Thank you, universe, for a beautiful day." I closed my eyes, and there was my brother, and he was in human form, wearing a black and red plaid flannel shirt, dungarees, and sandals. I had never seen or heard or anything like this before, and I started to talk with him, and I realized I didn't have to talk, and I sent thought, which was incredible, and it happened in a second. And I said, "David, how are you?" And he said, "I'm fine. Are you in pain?" "No, I'm not in pain. How are you, Becky?" And for a few seconds, we shared everything. And I looked behind him, and there were my grandparents, Bessie and Abram. And
no kidding.
They had passed. And they were holding hands, just like they always did. My 4'10" grandmother holding my 6'2" grandfather, Abe, her husband's hands, just like they always did. Edward, David's best friend who had passed, he was there. Holly, a very good friend of mine that had passed years ago, was there, and 24 other people who had passed. They were all there on a hill. And I thought, oh my gosh. And it was a beautiful, peaceful, lovely, comfortable, pleasant scene. And there was a golden arch, which is sort of funny, but there was a golden arch behind my brother.
Not McDonald's, right?
It was not. Was not.
Maybe they're hungry. I don't know.
And so, with all these books I've been reading, it was sort of a traditional concept that if you see a door and you go through the door, you could be going into another form of reality. So I looked to David to see if he'd take me through the door. And instead, my 4'10" grandmother, Bessie, takes me by the hand. And seriously, we skipped through the door.
Is that right?
It was amazing. On the other side of the door was a fuchsia colored land. And, my husband and I have 2 boys. And at this time, when all this happened, they were, I think about probably 4 and 6 or 5 and 7, right around there. And now they're older. Now one's 31 and one's 29. And they say, "Mom, do not say fuchsia colored land. You don't want to say that. It sounds like you're high. It sounds like you're smoking. You're loaded." None of that. I wasn't.
What did they propose you say instead?
Not to say the fuchsia. Don't say the fuchsia, Mom. Don't say it. But that was what it was. It was fuchsia. And on the other side, I didn't see my paternal grandfather, because grandma and grandpa were my maternal, my mom's parents. I didn't see my paternal grandfather who had passed, but I heard him. His name's Gramps. And he says, "Becky, get over here." And he takes me by the hand, and we fly through the air for what seemed like hours, reminiscing, sharing. It was incredible. And so we're having a lovely time. And all of a sudden, my horse starts to move. And so I'm sitting there on the horse, flying with my grandfather, flew through fuchsia-colored land, and my horse is moving. And I say, Gramps, I need to go back. And we do this U-turn in the air. He deposits me on the other side of the Golden Arch. My horse is moving. There's my brother, my grandparents, Edward, Holly, 24 other people. And I said, I have to go back. And they said, we will always be here.
Wow.
I pull up the reins and sat there on the horse for a long time. And I thought, what just happened to me? I had never, ever, ever, ever had any experiences like that. I've not been psychic. I was not spiritual. Like, this was the first time in my life that I believed that life was eternal. And it was fabulous. It was fabulous.
And so with that, did you share with your family what happened?
I did.
And what did they think?
Yeah, I was careful. Like, I shared with my husband. Well, actually, what happened was I went back to work. So I went back to work. And then that night over dinner, I said, Jeff, you wouldn't believe what happened today. And he looked at me, and he's very supportive, like absolutely wonderfully supportive. And he said, Becky, that's amazing. You might want to tell your parents. So I called to my parents, and they were fine. They weren't really sure what to do with this, but they didn't negate it. And I decided what I needed to do was look for a teacher. And I had no idea what this was called, how I was going to do it. And at that time, the internet wasn't very prominent. I don't even think I had a computer. It was 1995. And so I went to the library, and I walked up and down the halls of the library. And I don't know, Linda, whether I thought a book was going to fall out or something, but nothing happened. And I didn't know what to look for, the subject or anything. So I went to a health food store, and I thought, well, maybe a health food store will have something on the bulletin board. So I looked at the bulletin board, nothing resonated. And it was really the first time in my life that I actually sent a message out to the universe. And I said, can you please send me a teacher? I trusted that a teacher would come. And a couple of weeks later, one of my staff, an occupational therapist, Dr. Amy Carroll, walked in, and I didn't share any of this. Like, I kept it all quiet, except for very, 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 close family members, maybe a couple of friends. And so I said, well, Amy, it's really tough. And she said, I met someone that I think you might like. And I said, who's that? And she said, her name's Nancy Ariel, and she's a shaman. And I said, well, what's a shaman? And she said, well, Becky, I'm not really sure, but I believe a shaman believes that everything in life that's natural has energy that can be accessed. And she also talks with people that have passed on. And I'm like, no kidding. And so she lived, her name's Nancy Ariel, and she lived in a place called Reading, Pennsylvania, which is sort of like it's an urban, small little city. I thought if there were shamans, they would live in Brazil or Peru or something. Well, I ended up meeting Nancy. We connected immediately. I have audio tapes of every single session. And I apprenticed with Nancy for 3 to 6 hours a week for a year. And it was glorious. It was glorious. It was really, really fun. David came back. Lots of spirits came. I learned tons of communication skills with all sorts of entities and learned a lot. Wow. And that was 1995, 96. So I kept it quiet until just a couple of years ago.
So why did you keep it quiet for all that time?
I thought people would think I had lost my mind and that I was nuts. And I had this business that was going on. And at that point, I had 80 therapists. And I didn't want them to think that they were working with somebody that talked to dead people. Because, in 1995, it was not really common or accepted. And it wasn't as well known as it is now.
Right. Right.
So I kept it quiet. I didn't want to share it. I wrote a book, but I didn't publish it until a couple of years ago. And finally, I said to my chief financial officer, Bob, I said, Bob, this a couple of years ago, my soul is crying out for me to publish this book. And he said, Becky, I'll be glad to stay here, even if you're not here. And I said to him, well, you mean you'd like to buy the business? And we had talked about me selling, generally. And I'm like, he says, well, yes, if you think I can do it. And Bob and I had worked together for 20 years, side by side. And
so was he afraid that once your book came out, that you were doing basically career suicide? Was that what he was thinking?
I was thinking that was a possibility. And so I wanted to sell the business before I published the book.
Okay.
And so we switched roles, and he became president and I became CEO, and he already knew how to do everything anyway. And that's when I really went full time into getting an editor for the book and finding a publisher and publishing the book. And it's been magic. It's been magic ever since then.
It was a game changer for you.
It was wonderful.
And so when you came out with your book, do you have a copy with you right now?
I certainly do. Change Maker. Here we are. It's Change Maker, How My Brother's Death Woke Up My Life. And, I published it in the fall, September 13th, 2016. And in the spring, my husband and I started to do a lot of the marketing and the PR, and we're also visiting national parks, all the national parks in the United States. And
how cool is that?
It is fabulous. And so we're on the road 6 months out of the year, visiting national parks, promoting my book, doing all sorts of book lectures and talking about after-death communication. We were in Olympic National Park, which is in Washington, the state of Washington. And
where I live.
All right, Linda. So I didn't know that we had a rainforest. We have a rainforest in the United States at Olympic National Park. So we're in the whole rainforest, and I get an email, and it says, congratulations. Your book, Change Maker, How My Brother's Death Woke Up My Life, has now won 3 National Book Awards. And can you please come to the Book Expo of America in New York City and pick them up? And it was incredible. It was such a validation for after-death communication hitting the mainstream. And it's been a blast.
Yeah. Well, bless you and congratulations on that. The past few shows we've done, we've explored after-death communication. Last week was near-death experience. And we talk about this because death in all facets is very uncomfortable in our society. We live in a grief-phobic society. And so death has been around since the beginning of mankind, and we should be doing a much better job dealing with it. Mm-hmm. And so to my mind, the way to do that is to start the conversation. And that's exactly what we're doing right now tonight and talking about this. And that's what your book did when you wrote it and published it, is starting the conversation, because when we're brave, we make other people brave. And so, your experience with your brother, as interesting and cool as it is not unique. This kind of stuff happens to people all the time, but they keep it, just like you, under wraps for fear people will think they're crazy. And if we don't talk about it, people won't know how much comfort it brings their broken heart. And, I'm just going to say for myself, when my daughter died, I got to sit with her body at the crash scene. And as I was holding her hand, she already had the white sheet over her. I saw my 4'10" grandmother come for her and lead her to heaven. And does that cure my grief? Did that mean that I didn't grieve? No, of course not. But it brings me a lot of comfort. And that's why we're exploring this kind of stuff on Moments of Hope, because comfort comes in all sizes. And people have many wonderful experiences that are very powerful healing modalities. And so your experience with your brother, how has it changed your view about death?
Well, it's taught me that we do live forever, and it's allowed me a continuing relationship with my brother and my parents, because about 2 years ago, both my parents passed within 6 months of each other. And
Wow.
Dad went first and Mom was second. And I had immediate connection with Dad after he passed, because once you learn,
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Once you learn how to communicate with one person, it's actually not hard at all to communicate with lots of people, particularly ones that you know. And so I remember when Dad passed, I asked him, "So Dad, how is it? How is it, Dad?" And my dad was always trying to, what he called, crack the nut. He was very much a philosopher, an explorer. He really tried very hard to bring connection with people. And he said, "Becky, where I am, there is an unlimited possibility for me to explore as long as I want any avenue that I feel like. And so, you know what I'm going to do, Becky?" And I'm like, "What, Dad? What are you going to do?" He said, I'm going to be mindful in the moment, and I'm just going to be." And I thought, oh my gosh, that was so lovely. And then when my mom passed, it was tough. She had sciatica and chronic pain for 13 years. She was in pain for 13 years, and that's hard.
That's hard. Very hard.
Oh, she passed, and I heard a brief little message. It was a brief little thank you, like she gave to my two sisters and myself. I mean, we were very, very close family. And I didn't hear from Mom for 6 months. And I fully believe that she was being healed. When it was 6 months after she passed, my husband, Jeff, was doing a puzzle, and Mom always did puzzles. And so I was leaning over the card table, looking at my husband doing this puzzle, and all of a sudden in my head, I heard my mom, and she said, "The piece goes right there." And I'm like, "Oh, hi, Mom, how are you doing?" And she's very focused. "The piece goes right there." So we put the piece in, and she has been present all the time, like all the time. And she's happy, and she's back to the way she was before pain. She's cheerful. She often comes as a bird, and it's glorious. It's glorious to look out the window and see animals, or have dreams, or have experiences with our loved ones. And I truly believe that I am communicating with them.
That is so beautiful, and I love it. And thank you for sharing that. You know, there's a couple of things that I want to bring up. The first thing is that when we talk about stuff like this, the first question people ask me, well, isn't it evil? Oh. And because I just did this presentation, Hugs from Heaven, about after-death communication, and people say, you know, isn't it evil? Isn't it the devil in sheep's clothing? And my feeling, from the top of my head to the tip of my toes, is that anything that's comforting and makes us feel loved can't be from the devil. It can't. And after-death communication is actually all throughout both the New and the Old Testament. So it is not from the devil. Anything that makes us feel good is not from the devil. But how did you feel then when your book came out and suddenly you, as this science-based expert, owner of this thriving business, occupational therapist, you know, all of that, how were you received by your colleagues? Were you afraid?
That's a good question, Linda. I wasn't really afraid, because I was ready, but I've been waiting for pushback, and I haven't got it. I have not received the pushback, and people actually like the book. And what it does is Changemaker goes through every month, and it starts, every chapter is a month. So chapter 1 is when David passed, and chapter 2 goes into November when I saw him, and chapter 3 goes into when I saw Nancy and started to learn. And so each chapter talks about what happened to me, but with the occupational therapy part, at the end of every chapter, I have what's called an illumination, and that's where I talk directly to the reader. And I say, so what do you think? Does this make sense? If it does, here's some activities, some suggestions. And in the back, Here's some resources and references. And these are the books that I read that pertain to that particular chapter. And there's about 270 references. And I put those in because I always like to teach people if they want. Yeah. But I also wanted people to know if they think I'm an imbecile, at least they'll know I'm a well-read imbecile. And it's
with a very good pedigree.
You're very kind about that. But it has been a wonderful experience. I am so honored when people read Changemaker. I'm like, wow, and people tell me these little things and how it really helped them. And it's been magical. It's absolutely been magical. And it's not, when you said it was evil or thought, sometimes people think it's evil. It certainly seems the opposite of that to me, because we're sharing love.
Right.
And love is so strong. There's
no room for evil in love.
No,
there's just no room. And so what do you say when you share your story and there's a naysayer in the crowd? How do you handle that?
Most of the time there isn't a naysayer in the crowd. I mean, I have so many stories that in my mind validate what happened to me that I think it causes people to pause. And if they say, I just don't believe that, I'll say, well, that's okay. That's your life. We have free will. We have free will on this earth, and we can believe whatever we want to believe. I'm just sharing what happened to me, and I can teach you how to do that. And I've started the last like year, maybe year and a half, there's a free course on my website, and it's called Rebecca's Communication Course, and it's free.
That's crazy cool.
And it's designed to help people know that they too can do that, because can communicate, because there's nothing special about me that allowed me to do it. There's nothing, absolutely no difference between me and anybody.
But the fact that you put it as a free resource on your site helps to quell the possibility that you are just a quack trying to make money off of, vulnerable people.
Sure.
Because I've heard that. Some people have that, they opine that, and that is their belief system. So the fact that you have it on there free is amazing. Bless you for doing that, because it really comes down to, just as you said, love. And when you've lost someone you love, who's now on the other side, and you are able to reestablish that connection, albeit it's a different connection. I would much rather have my daughter here, where I can smell her hair, touch her skin, and wrap my arms around her and give her a big hug.
Sure.
But the connection with her on the other side is very comforting. And to me, that's priceless.
I totally agree.
Yeah. And so where are you today? Are you, do you still own your thriving practice?
I don't. I sold it. And so I've got another practice where it's just me, which is curious, because I ended up selling with, I think we had 375 therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech pathologists. Wow. And we service 13,000 clients a year. Mostly pediatrics is what is happening right now. But we did pediatrics and adults. And so that's still going on, which is great. And what I'm doing is teaching Reiki, which is a form of natural healing. And quite frankly, I teach Reiki because I think it's a wonderful healing art. That's the Boston accent, healing art that especially medical practitioners can use. So I'm teaching it to occupational therapy practitioners, physical therapists, nurses, physicians, physician assistants. And so I'm doing that all over the place. And in just a few days, I'm headed down to New Orleans for the 5th year in a row to teach Reiki Level 1 and Reiki Level 2 at the American Occupational Therapy National Conference. But that's
fantastic,
Linda. It was so interesting. I've been doing that since 2015, and it was about a year and a half ago, Duquesne University in Pittsburgh asked me to teach Reiki to their graduating class. And then they partnered with the Pennsylvania Occupational Therapy Association. And so in one weekend, there were 70 people trained in Reiki.
Wow.
At that weekend, there were 20% that had after-death communication experiences. And these are people
Oh
that
my gosh.
most had never even heard of Reiki. But for whatever reason, 15 people had after-death communication experiences, most for the very first time during Reiki. And so I'm quite a big proponent that learning Reiki, which you can learn in one day, is really a nice way to raise our electromagnetic energy, to raise our vibrational fields, which puts us in touch, which can put us in touch with the afterlife much easier.
Okay.
And
so that's the link.
It's been very interesting. It's been really, really interesting.
So one of my questions was to ask you, how have you meshed the two worlds, a science-based, evidence-based clinician type of world with a non-evidence-based energy working world? Some people call New Age. I don't think there's anything new about it. Reiki itself is an ancient Japanese practice, and so it's certainly not new. But my question was how you have meshed those two, but you've already answered that in a beautiful, beautiful way. Well, I think it's fantastic.
Thanks, Linda. Actually, there's a better answer. So after Duquesne had me, I started to market it to other universities. And one of the universities that was interested is Stockton University, and they're in New Jersey. And so my husband and I are out camping and visiting these national parks. And I get this email and they said, can we invite physical therapists? And I'm like, sure, that'd be great. And they said, in order to qualify in New Jersey for physical therapy, licensure, and continuing education credits, you need to find 5 peer-reviewed medical journal articles that have been published in the last 5 years that support the medical use of Reiki in the medical profession. And I'm like, holy moly. And I got them. I actually have them, and it was accepted Reiki level 1 for New Jersey PT licensure board continuing education credits, and level 2. And I just finished teaching actually at Stockton a couple of days ago, and there were multiple people that said, people have said it's not medically based, and they hand them the 10 pages of references that I provide in every single Reiki class. And it's actually helped people believe that now there is medical-based validity for what's happening with energy medicine. And Reiki now is called biofield energy, because there's energy inside and energy outside. And so you add the biofield energy component and the scientific basis, and it really makes a very nice one-day presentation. It's pretty interesting.
That's fantastic, and that's amazing. And really, you single-handedly are really paving this path into making it more mainstream. When you're able to teach it at the collegiate level and at national conferences and bring it that way, that's making a huge impact that will benefit the world.
It will.
The future generations.
It's not single-handedly, like everybody's doing it. Like I'm very glad to be in the forefront, but everybody heals themselves. When we provide Reiki, it's not us that does Reiki, it's the client that heals themselves. And the first thing you learn is self-healing. That's the first thing, because if we can heal ourselves, then we can help other people heal, which is just what you're doing, Linda. We're sharing the hope.
Well, the truth is, I think about when I heal others, I heal myself.
Sure.
And, when I hug someone else, it soothes my own heart.
Yes. Well,
and it's, what's good for the giver is good for the receiver. Absolutely. And so it's such a two-way exchange. And, that's incredible. So what do you want people who are watching you right now, what do you want them to take away from your experience with your brother?
Good question. I would love for people to at least think that we do live eternally. And it's such a concept. If we live eternally, well, what does that mean? What does that mean to a person if we live eternally? Right. And for me, it's like, well, let's share love, because we're going to be around forever. So let's share love. let's be love. Let's provide love. Let's send love. And so to think, if we do live forever, which I 100,000,000% believe, would that change the way they're living this life now? Because it's only a temporary existence, and the classic phrase, we're spiritual beings in a physical body. And it's pretty interesting, when you start to think, well, this is just a temporary existence, and we're going to see each other again.
It changes your, your outlook on it. And I think about how, some people believe that when you die, when you're dust, you're dust. And then there's others who don't believe in life after death because their religious organization says that that's not what happens. And then there's other religious organizations who say that's exactly what happens. Reincarnation happens, this, that, and the other. And the truth is that none of us really know until it's our turn to go. But I suspect that when it's my turn to go, it's going to be just a continuation of the adventure that I'm already on. And how cool is that? Love never dies.
It's so awesome. And love, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but love doesn't die. And
it doesn't die. And yeah. And so, the thought that for me, that my daughter is still part of my life, and she lets us know, and not just me, I'm from a big family. She lets everyone in our family know that she's still part of our life. And how cool is that? And so one day we'll all be together again on the same side of the veil, and until then, it's comforting to me to know that she is actively participating in my life now, just in ways that, I hadn't experienced until she died.
Yeah.
And so I'm very grateful for you coming on the show. If there's any final thing that you can say to the viewers, what would you say?
I before I say a few final words, I do want to say there is a wonderful organization called the International Association of Near-Death Studies, and they're having their annual conference in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania this year, 20 minutes from my house, which is unbelievable. And it's filled with stories of afterlife, absolutely filled. And it's also filled with neuroscientists, researchers, the general public. It's a wonderful group, and it's August 29th to September 1st, 2019. And it's IANS, International Association of Near-Death Studies. So that's happening. So I did want to put that out there. But my final words is feel free to keep me in touch. I'm very accessible. I'd love to share information with you or have people share information with me. My website is accessible. That's where this free course is. It's just my name, Becky Austill Clausen.com. No hyphens, no periods or anything like that. And I really thank you so very much. Think about my book, Changemaker, How My Brother's Death Woke Up My Life. And it's available in ebook and print and Amazon and Barnes and Noble and indie bookstores all over the place. But I am so grateful to have the opportunity to talk with you. It's been a blast.
It's a joy to have you on the show. And so I'm grateful, for starters, very grateful. But I suspect that your website's going to get a lot busier because you've got that free resource. And again, it's about comfort. It's about love. How do we connect with our loved ones on the other side? Are they there? Well, viewers, find out for yourself. Go to Becky's website, download the free PDF, and check it out. And then let Becky know. Let me know. I would love to hear your feedback because this kind of stuff is part of my world as well. And, it's something that has brought me tremendous comfort. And again, when we're brave enough to talk about it, other people get brave too. And that's really what it's all about. So thank you for joining me tonight, Becky. I am so grateful. You are a true joy to have. I do hope to have you back on the show again. Your energy is fantastic. You have lots of adventures and experiences. And so circle back to us here in about a year and share the past year with us and let us know. I'll live vicariously through your eyes. And
You're very kind. I've loved it. And thank you for all you do, Linda. I mean, truly, thank you very, very much.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. Well, you have a wonderful night, Becky, and thanks so much for joining us. And viewers, thank you for joining us. And to find Becky, just go to her website. Her name is on the screen, and take away the dashes and the spaces, put a .com at the end, and there you are. Free resources. Find it. You can email Becky, send her a message, ask her questions. And are you also on Facebook?
I am on Facebook. It's curious. It's Becky Austill Clausen is my author name, so that's the name of my website. But yes, the professional Facebook is Becky Austill Clausen, and yes,
okay. But they can probably. Is there a link from your website to your Facebook page?
Yep.
Okay, so they can. That makes it easy.
Instagram, Twitter, the whole thing. Yeah, I need to get better with social media, but it's a joy.
Just when we have, 5 or 6 figured out, 3 more crop up, it's like whack-a-mole. I mean, trying to figure out, you think, okay, now I'm thinking I'm getting this, and right. And then more. It's like, but thank you for all that you do. Bless you for all the comfort you bring all the people, not just through sharing your book, Changemaker, but also through your brother's story. Bless his soul. And bless you for the therapy that you provide all those people and helping them with their activities of daily living so that they can live with some quality of life and dignity. That is a blessing. So thank you so much, Becky. We'll see you next time.
Awesome. Lots of love. Thank you.
All right. Lots of love to you too. Take care. Have a wonderful night, everyone. Bye-bye.